This is Harley Howard, and welcome to What Saith the Scripture radio program. Come join us with your Bibles open as we study through the Gospel of Luke.
20th chapter of Luke. I just want to go back to verse 20 briefly because it's going to set us up for what's coming in terms of review. And it's a remarkable verse to me, a remarkable verse on so many levels. The setup here then at verse 19, after once again he rebuked the representatives of the Sanhedrin, they wanted to lay hands on him. And I always say that's not religious, but that's an expression that's used, that they wanted to find a reason to arrest him, but they couldn't find any reason because, first of all, they didn't have any reason to do it, and second, they were fearful of the people. And so they were persistent in trying to find something that they could use to have Jesus arrested and or killed, because we've studied clearly that the intent of these men were to have Jesus killed. It wasn't even enough to have him arrested. They wanted him dead, but they would settle for arrest if they could even get that. And so verse 20, and they watched him, which is a verb, they kept watching him, and sent forth spies which should feign themselves just men. That statement always amazes me, that they sent forth spies who disguised themselves as righteous men, that they might lay or take hold of his words, so that they might deliver him unto the power and authority of the governor. So they were so desperate, this group of representatives from the Sanhedrin, they were so desperate in wanting to get Jesus killed, that they sent a series of spies whose sole purpose was to constantly be watching him, so that they could, in their mind, look for an opportunity in which to trap him by his words. They were liars in wait, so to speak, masking themselves to be his disciples, so that whatever he says, if he says something that could be used against him by the government, Roman authorities, that's what they were banking on, because they knew that they didn't really have any power of their own to do anything to him at all. So they knew the only way that they could get him was they had to use the authorities, the Roman authorities that were there. And this group of men from the Sanhedrin, they already knew that Pilate would have to condemn Jesus if they were to put him to death. That was their intent. And as you get to the end, you'll find that's exactly what they did. But they feigned themselves just men. And we saw that the spies, or the certain of the Pharisees and the scribes, that's who they really are, according to Mark chapter 12. And so they were a combination of religious and political hypocrites who disguised themselves as disciples of Christ for the purpose of trying to get Jesus killed. And the amazing thing was that the Sanhedrin knew this was going on, the Jewish ruling authority. So these men were sent with their blessing. Not only that, but we also saw last time that the Herodians were a political party that supported a pro-Roman dynasty, which was 180 degrees opposite anything that had to do with Judaism. I mean, there was no commonality between the Herodians and the Pharisees, scribes, the Sanhedrin, none of them. No common ground, except when it came to trying to get rid of Jesus. Okay, so they were willing to dismiss their hatred for each other because their hatred for Christ was even more than a hatred for one another. Amazing. And I talked about how many people in the church, and we know from experience, many years that many people are in churches feigning themselves to be righteous, men and women, boys and girls, and the motive of them going is to really to take down the church, and they usually try to do it. I've watched both methods, from the bottom up and then from the top down. my feeling is you always go for the top first. If you're going to take everything out, start from the top, take it down. You notice these men weren't really trying to work on the disciples up. They want Jesus out. And once you take away him, everything from that point goes down. So the top is always being gunned. All right. They may infiltrate the bottom and try to divert the attention of the leadership by looking at the diversion. But that's a method too, to take the top down. Now, these hypocrites deliberated or convened a council together and planned a scenario that they thought would place Jesus into a trap with his own words so that he could be rejected by the Jewish people and arrested by the Roman authorities. And the issue had to do with paying taxes to Rome. We said paying the poll tax was the most obvious sign of submission to Rome. In AD 6, Judas of Galilee, which was mentioned, I believe, in the book of Acts by Gamaliel, the same Judas, led a revolt against the first procurator because he took a census for tax purposes. And the Jewish zealots claimed that the poll tax was a God-dishonoring badge of slavery to the pagans. So this trap was to put Jesus into the position where he would either alienate a major part of the population or else lay himself open to a charge of treason. See, for Jesus to refuse to pay taxes was a capital crime. So if they can get him to say, well, we shouldn't pay the poll tax, that's all they needed. Capital offense, you don't want to pay taxes, you die. Especially someone with Jesus's leadership qualities. He would be perceived as a leader of a revolt. We got to get rid of him. And so here these men, feigning themselves to be righteous, they start to set off this plan. And the first thing they do is that they try to get Jesus flattered. Okay, they want to flatter him. So the first thing you start doing is verse 21, Master, we know that thou sayest and teachest rightly, neither acceptest thou the person of any, but teachest the way of God truly. That's all flattery. Now, what they said was true. Okay, don't get me wrong. What they said was true and accurate about the Lord. But their intent, okay, the intention of these men was to flatter the Lord, to trap him. Okay. Many fail to recognize the hypocrisy of flattery and allow their heads to become rather puffed up, and therefore they fall right into the trap of the enemy. The first word they said was master, which means teacher. So they recognize him as a teacher, and they probably recognize him, at least in this case, as a chief teacher, because you wouldn't call someone a master who was not a chief teacher. So outwardly they're saying, well, you know, you're a chief teacher, no doubt. You have tremendous teaching skills, etc., etc. Then they say, we know that thou sayest and teach rightly. In other words, we know or regard you as a true or loving the truth and a truthful man. In other words, they were saying he was a straight truth teacher. You know, he's a straight shooter. So they're acknowledging that. Man, you teach that truth right. Yeah, well, why aren't you following it then? This is usually the question. If what you're saying is true, then why aren't you following it? Neither acceptest thou the person of any. It's not that Jesus didn't care for mankind. What they're saying is that Jesus shows no favoritism. And that's the mark of a genuine teacher. You don't show partiality, because one of the things that God demanded in the Old Testament of those who were going to be his servants to the people is that they had to be a reflection of his character. Okay, so God is not partial. And as a teacher, pastor, preacher, whatever, you can't be partial. No matter how much your heart may tug at that, your ministry is not your ministry. Okay, your ministry is God's ministry. So you have to make sure that when people are listening and watching you, that they see the Lord. They don't see you. That's why truth has to be spoken without regard to how the hearer is going to respond to it, because that's not my responsibility or any man of God's responsibility. The hearers need to understand they just heard from the Lord. They didn't hear from Harley. They didn't hear from somebody else. They need to understand that God is not partial, and so therefore we can't reflect the partiality in our teaching. And I know in this age, that's way out of season because everyone is being pampered in their teachings. And if you don't pamper them, they take their Bible, their liberal Bible, and go home. They take their, what Dr. Lame Strauss used to call their perversion of the Bible, and go home. Well, go home. Everyone who came here knew what they were getting themselves into. It's almost like you tell them, okay, here's a prerequisite. You're going to get the truth. Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Okay, just want you to know that. So we all get it. We all get it. No different. Can't be partial. They didn't believe it, of course, what they were saying about the Lord. He says, or they say, but teach us the way of God truly. In other words, you are a teacher of the way to God and of God concerning or according to truth. So you are a teacher which teaches people in the right way to get to God. That's what they said about him. And they didn't believe any of it. It was all flattery. It was all a lie. They didn't believe a single word of it. They said he was completely truthful and accurate about the way to God. Didn't believe it. They said all the right words about the Lord, but they believed not one bit of it, because if they did, they would have followed him as his disciples. It is, as one writer said, quoting, thus their statements, though actually true of Jesus, covered bitter hatred. Their kind words were as deceitful in their purpose as a kiss of Judas. Now, the interesting thing about the Lord in comparison to us is that the Lord could not be moved with flattery, but we can. Because when I look at the Bible and it gives instructions about flattery, the instruction is never to God, it's to us. Okay, so I'm going to take some time. We're going to talk about that because it's important for us to understand that flattery is a trap. It really is. Because if we're not careful, we're not prayerful, we could be fooled by flattery. And not only careful and prayerful, but filled with and walking in the Spirit and the word of Christ dwelling in us richly, we could fall to the flattery of others. It doesn't matter who or whom or what is saying what, and we could all be set up for the big takedown. Proverbs 26. Let's turn there. Proverbs 26. We're going to look at 3 verses in this 26th chapter and 1 verse in the 29th chapter, because we need to see that, and I've experienced, I know I have, I know you have, we all have, in this room, we all have experienced flattery, but more specifically, the motive behind it and the deceitful nature of the one who is flattering us. I think it's fair to say we all have experienced that to some degree or another. So we're going to look at just briefly the real motive behind flattery in the Old Testament, and then we're going to see exactly how it ties into this. Verse 24, he that hateth dissembleth with his lips and layeth up deceit within him. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. And verse 28 says, a lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth worketh ruin. Let's go back to verse 24. He that hateth dissembleth with his lips, and layeth up deceit within him. So we're talking about someone who has hatred in their heart for people or an individual, whatever. And the word dissembleth means they pretend. They pretend to be your friend. They pretend to really like you, but it's a cloak to disguise the true nature of their own heart. They really don't care about you at all. The person waits for the right opportunity to express their hatred. The person really within is malicious and planning deceit, disguising it with smooth words. Verse 25, when he speaketh fair, or when he speaketh graciously, do not believe him. I like the simplicity of Solomon. He says, if you see this kind of person, and you see it, and you hear what they're saying, and you know it, you don't believe them. Anything they say. Now, I've worked around these kinds of people, and I'm telling you, I don't believe a word they say. They can tell me that the sky is above my head, as I say all the time, and the ground beneath my feet, and I wouldn't believe them. I'd have to have a second opinion because I don't trust theirs. That's the kind of people we have to deal with. And he says, if you see this kind of person and they speak graciously, don't believe anything they tell you. Do not place your trust or confidence in them. Don't agree with them. What they say outwardly is not in any way what is on the inside of them. Don't believe them. He says there are 7 abominations in his heart. In other words, their heart is filled with detestable thoughts and motives and agendas and behavior. Don't believe them. If you and I run into these kinds of people, it ain't time to go, let me think about, don't believe them. Prayer is no substitute for action. When it's time to do something, we do it. In this case, you don't believe this person. Verse 28, a lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it. So a person that lies to you is a person that hates you. That's why I detest lying. I don't want to be around people that lie. Because really they hate you. They don't care about you. I don't trust liars. I don't trust them. I had to tell someone in this park, I don't trust you because you lie too much. And I don't want to be around you. You know, I've told people I don't trust you. If you lie to me, don't come near me. Because I don't trust liars. I put no confidence in someone who lies. And you get one shot lying with me. You don't get a second chance. Because I don't want people around me that lie. Because I know you don't care for me. They desire to harm others by slandering their reputations. Most of them use flattery to achieve their hateful schemes. It says, by a flattering mouth worketh ruin. So with a flattering mouth, they want to destroy a person. You want those kinds of people around you? I don't want them around me. Do you think I want to trust what they tell me? No. Well, you might be perceived as insensitive. I can live with that. I have a problem with that. I'll let them ruin your life, and you come back and tell me how you feel about it. It's not a question of perception. It's a question of truth. We all live in a world right now where there's a lot more emphasis on perception than reality. You know, when we grew up, you used to have to study history, real history. Okay. You have to research. You have to go to the library. You have to pull out books. And there were those men and women who were very credible in terms of their research and studies. And they would have the bibliographies, and you would see their credible studies and what have you. That's then. I'm surprised any libraries exist, and I know some of them have shut down. Now we can redact history. We can redact it so much where if Oliver Stone wants to redact history, he can just make JFK. Complete fabricational nonsense. The whole thing, complete nonsense. But people believe it as true. Why? Because they see it on the screen. Because it seemed credible. Everything a lot of these people, put on the screen is just all to be it's all propaganda. It's all designed to rewrite history. One of my favorite movies when I was a teenager, favorite movies of all time was Patton. I loved that movie. George C. Scott was amazing. The whole thing was a bunch of nonsense. When you study the real history, much of that was completely made up. And I believed it as a kid because it was on the screen and Patton was bigger than life. A lot of stuff in that movie was complete fabrication. When they say based on a true story, don't believe a word of it, because that doesn't mean anything anymore. This doesn't mean anything anymore. So history is all redacted. If you can put up on the screen and in the age where everyone's doing this, I get so tired of seeing people doing this all the time. I'm talking to you. Do you hear me? Hold on. You do that, They're texting now. You can't talk anymore like a human being. You got to sit there and get mad and, get carpal tunnel from all that texting. You've seen people probably come your press. Their hands all like that all the time. But history gets redacted, and we're being deceived with our eyes wide open about it. I'd be careful about this stuff. I have to be careful about flattery. You got to be very careful about everything. The motive of the flatterer is to destroy someone's life, is not to help them. So someone is out there saying wonderful things about you, put up just a little flag first. Say, wait, let's see what this is all about. Put up that little red flag and just at least be cautious and fly the flag low. Just be cautious of what you hear, what you see, because you never really know yet. Proverbs 29:5. A man that flattereth his neighbor spreadeth a net for his feet. You ever see in the Bible, nothing is ever commended about flattery? I never found a single word that was commendable. Not a single verse commends flattery. But it always condemns it. I never found a single verse that commended hypocrisy. It always condemns it. I never found a single verse that ever commended unbelief, but always condemns it. I never found a single verse that ever commended lying. In fact, the book of Revelation teaches that all liars shall have their part in the lake of fire, brimstone that burn forever. And people lie like they breathe in this culture. And they're not afraid of the afterlife. They're not afraid of what's coming. A person who uses flattery attempts to seduce his friend into a trap. Constant warnings in both the Psalms and the Proverbs about the sin of flattery. Never commended in the Bible. Never. Truth is, righteousness is, integrity is, honesty, love. These are all commended. Flattery is a trap. It's a trap. There's nothing good about it. Nothing good in here about it. And this is important. Okay, above everything else, I think I use flattery to good. Is it true in here? We're supposed to be living by the book. Is it true in here? Do you see any of it being commended by God in here? No. I mean, we should take heed to it. So all this flattery was laid upon the Lord as if they could trap him by flattery, knock him off his game, so to speak. Back to Luke 20. And so after all this long preamble, as one writer called it, here comes the real trap. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar and Caesar or not? Should we give to Caesar or should we not? They thought they had him. Again. They thought they had him. It was a meaningless question, of course, which was spawned from meaninglessness or meaningless hypocritical praise of the one they absolutely hated. So the setup was complete, and they came in for the kill. They thought they had him. And this is all done publicly for the purpose of discrediting the man so that they can discredit the message. They discredit the man, they can discredit the ministry. That's the whole intent. Take out the head. Everything he does is meaningless at this point. So that's the motive. That's the motto. Take out the head. Everything he says or does is meaningless. So they cloaked their hatred of Christ in their alleged request of his opinion about the payment of taxes. And it was an opinion. And you got to be careful, because sometimes a hypocrite wants to know what your opinion is. You better be careful about giving your opinion, because you don't know what they're going to do with that information. Everything you say can and will be used against you. Everything that you say to people. So they want, well, what do you think about this? My question is, why do you want to know? I think I'm moving on to the next person. Yeah, that's a good idea. Why do you want to know? What do you plan to do with the information? Who are you going to take it to? If you're a believer, people ain't going to like us. They want you and I out of the picture. Listen, if we have any credibility at all to anybody, the devil is gunning for us 24/7. And sometimes we let our guard down. We think the most simple, they're not going to do that. That's the time you're going to get got. When you think the devil's not out there to take you out, that's the time you get taken out. We have to always be on guard, always vigilant. Even if it seems like sometimes we drive ourselves nuts. Is there ever a break? Yes, heaven, that's the break. While you're on earth, stay vigilant all the time. Because you never know. You never know. That means you're suspect. Yes, admittedly. I'll go back to something you were saying earlier. As many times my heart been beat up, I got to be suspicious of just about everybody. I've been crushed, beat, battered, stomped on. And all those people I've trusted. Those are people I trusted. Okay. I'm already suspicious of the ones who I don't know. But when the ones that you give your life to does it, you have to be. You're almost forced to be suspicious of what people say. Not that you want to be, but that you have to be. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep trusting because that's who I have to be. I can't be bitter about what people, I can't. If you're bitter, they win. You lose. You lose. These people have already gone on. They're not even thinking about you. And then we don't want to live our life as if they're thinking about us all the time. I don't care what they think about us or you or me. This is our life. We get to live our life for God. We can't afford to let our own bitterness do to us what they couldn't do to us. Take us out. Let this stuff go. It ain't worth it. It's not worth it. And I know, and we all know to some degree, some greater than others. We all know the bitterness that can happen. Let it go. If it flares up, recognize it, let it go. Because it always pops up. Something you do reminds you of the person, right? So I go through it too. Something you see, something somebody said, and here it comes. Let it go. I'm no Superman. I go through the same struggles everybody else goes through every single day. And we always have to come to a place we have to let stuff go. And you'll be surprised that it becomes less and less and less. And then you want, well, what happened to something? Well, that's already done. You let it go. Okay, well, move on to something else. Bitterness is easy, especially when you know you're right and you've been hurt. And I understand it.
Thank you for listening to What Saith the Scripture radio program on Word Central Radio. May God bless you and keep you until next time is my prayer.